Right. Well, I think this is my last interview at the Rebellious Media Conference, and we have a really interesting person who's come over specifically from France and ran a workshop, and I think he's published a book. So let's actually allow him to introduce himself.
My name's Patrick Chalmers. I'm a former salaried journalist, now alternative journalist, and author. I've written a book about the transition from salaried journalist to alternative, whatever you want to call it, journalist.
So you're a traditional media journalist. Why did you stop, and why did you move into the alternative world?
My politics got ahead of my job, basically. I wrote a lot about globalization, about trade, environment, and I was less and less happy with the quality of the output of the organization I was working for. I was working for Reuters News, the international news agency, and the issue there was more of time. These were very complex subjects. I had an opportunity to dip into them when there were big events where you could do coverage, but the deeper, more analytical, more structural analysis, radical analysis of saying things have to change just wasn't possible.
And was this simply a matter of time, or was there an ideological drive to this? Did they not cover these things because they didn't want to cover them, or was it just because there wasn't time, it just didn't fit their agenda?
At the time, when I was in that job, I didn't have the critical analysis to understand the Chomsky model, for example. People know about the propaganda model here. I certainly didn't know about it then. I thought I was a good guy trying to do my best in a job that didn't allow me enough time. As to the ideology of my editors or the organization, Chomsky deals with that as well. It's you don't necessarily know it. You're just trying to do your best, and you know something's missing. That's what happened for me, and you just don't really know how to deal with it. And for me, what happened was that just became untenable. The job was just not satisfactory, and I was really lucky. I got a voluntary redundancy, or the chance of it, and I bit their hands off.
So you've been at the conference all weekend. Can you tell me some of the highlights?
There have been a lot of highlights. It's almost been like a sort of permanent highlight, and that's from meeting individual alternative media makers. It's from a lot of the sessions. What I am interested in myself is the job of journalism to improve public accountability and governance structures. And you hear what you're listening for, obviously, but I've just heard that come up again and again and again in different forms, different expressions. Chomsky talked about it on Saturday, about the need for long-term fundamental change, and loads of other people have talked about sustainable structures, how to spread beyond our little radical media ghetto into normal human being land. And it's not to be disparaging of either, but this is where we live, and we need to speak to people out there. And that's really come through.
So, Vision on TV is an example of a project that's trying to get out of the activist ghetto, and it does exist, the activist ghetto. It's quite a bounded, small community of people. What strategies would you advise, for any groups who wanted to reach out and build something outside of this ghetto?
Well, I live in southwest France with my family. I think you have to start where you live. You've got to do local media, and over the sort of 6 years that I've been out of Reuters, sort of 5 of those I've been doing regular monthly screenings of political films, education of ourselves and opportunities for others to have access to that, free, regular screenings. And because it's France, you bring food, you eat food together, you watch the film, and then you talk about it. And you're talking to complete strangers about politically controversial subjects, and you're not killing each other. That's already, it's a major step forward, because the problem I had at Reuters was my poor political education. Sure, I knew the superficial stuff that, democracy means having elections every now and again, but I had nothing in the way of fundamental analysis of why it's not democracy. Democracy means, governance by the people. The people govern themselves. It's not a vote every 5 years.
So, but you're a highly paid journalist at Reuters. You're supposed to be an expert on the subject. It seems strange that you're not, and you don't have the time to be.
It's pathetic. It's we should learn this stuff at school. In fact, funny enough, the French are better at learning this stuff at school. But it's disgraceful that I could have done a job. I mean, it's not to beat myself up either, but you just sort of, I cannot believe it. I was a paid journalist doing my job perfectly effectively, and I couldn't take you much beyond the idea that democracy was about elections. Elections free and fair is the great American academic definition of, and it's complete, hogwash. It just blinkers us from the reality of what it's about, which is power and who has it, and we don't.
So you've written a book about this transition from being a traditional journalist into being this new radical, sort of more open journalism. Can you tell us a little bit about the book and how people can get involved in it?
Yep. It's called Fraudcast News. It's about democracy and journalism. I think you can't, for me, the point of journalism is to be a societal good, to be at the service of society. And originally I thought that was at the service of democracy until I discovered, the major problems there are with democracy. So it means journalism that is looking at public accountability, looking at governance and changing it, and not apologizing for saying, this is rubbish, we've got to change it, in language that normal people understand. So Fraudcast News describes me and my little conventional journey from wanting to be a mainstream journalist, getting into it. It wasn't easy, it took time. I went to journalism school and I got into a salaried job. And then, as I said, the politics catching up, and just, this is not the place to stay. I have you have a life that you want to feel proud of. And they weren't bad people. There's some lovely people at Reuters, but I wasn't doing anything that coincided with my original ideas of journalism. I sort of read Pilger, I read Robert Fisk, and I thought, that's what I'd love to do. And I thought Reuters might be a place to do that sort of stuff, but boy was I wrong, obviously. And so Fraudcast News is to describe that journey and then to talk about how to build local journalism as a way of effectively building the equivalent of Reuters that I'd sort of dreamed about, journalism that serves the public on a global scale, which is why I love Vision on TV. I think what you guys are doing is excellent, and I want to steal as much material as I can and teach people how to make local media.
So all our resources are Creative Commons and all our films are Creative Commons, so feel free to take away, steal them and reuse them. And I love the idea of screenings with food and sociability, because that's what film's about. It's about bringing people together so they can have a shared experience and then talk to each other afterwards. It's more the conversations are more important than the conversation. And I love the French way of doing it with with delightful, tasty things. Anyway, we should wrap this up. Where can people find the book?
Well, the title, as I say, is Fraudcast News. My name is Patrick Chalmers. I, at the moment, have a WordPress blog, so you can whack those in the search engine and you'll get it. The book will be free to read online. I totally get Creative Commons. You guys are right, and this is about democracy. I don't want people to have to pay to get this. If you want a hard copy, you'll be able to download it and pay, obviously, for the cost of printing and the rest. The ebook will be DRM free, and if you know what that means, you'll know why that is important. But it basically boils down to being able to read it on whatever the hell you like, rather than some sort of fruit-related product. And so it gets beyond that.
Thank you very much. So that's our final show, I think, from the Rebellious Media Conference. And thank you for everyone who's been interviewed, and thank you for the lovely weekend.